Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to After the Buzzer. It feels like it's been forever. The Heat have been on the road. They have an all-star break, but we are back in the saddle, and we are here to talk about the Miami Heat's 131-109 victory over the Atlanta Hawks, getting a little revenge for Monday's game. I'm Couper Moorhead, your host, and in this video, we're going to talk about the defense, the change that happened in the defense, and especially what Davion Mitchell was able to add to that defense. And then we'll talk about some rotation changes. Haywood Highsmith, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo had both strong, efficient games, but this is a great one, a great opportunity to talk about the other guys who filled in and made this such a powerful offensive game and a get-back game, a feel-good win that they needed after, some tough offensive games. So before we get to those topics, though, let's talk about the game itself. It is such an NBA thing to have your worst shooting game of the season on Monday, 17.5% from three, and follow it up with your best shooting game of the season 2 days later against the exact same team, 54.8% from three, both times around 40 attempts. Miami had previously been in a bit of a rut from three, a little bit before the trade deadline, since the trade deadline, but that's the thing about slumps. They end, and it ended tonight. They got their revenge. They kept the head-to-head tiebreaker alive with Atlanta. Atlanta is up in the season series 2-1 still, but they play again later in March. If they tie, you go to deeper tiebreakers, and both these teams are neck and neck, right, in that play-in 7, 8, 9, 10 range right now, and it could be really important. The Heat have been at the mercy of those tiebreakers fairly often in the past decade, off and on, so we know those are important, and it was important to keep that one alive. Tonight, Davion Mitchell had a career-best tying shooting game, 5 of 5 from three. Haywood Highsmith returned to the rotation. As we said, Hero and Bam both had great nights. Duncan Robinson did what he does with 6 of 13 from three. He ended a little bit of a slump because Duncan Robinson ends slumps. Eventually, he's that good of a shooter. But what was a very fun offensive game in the first half, back and forth, it was still trading buckets with the Hawks. The same thing that happened in a much slower, more methodical offensive game on Monday. That was still, the Heat lost that game because they were trading buckets when they were already down in that fourth quarter. Well, that same thing was happening, through the first 2.5 quarters tonight. With the Hawks, their shooting was just as resurgent as Miami's. They were over 50% from three as well. But then the Hawks cooled off. The Heat didn't, and that was your game. And we'll get to why the Hawks cooled off right now. Midway through the third quarter, all that back and forth, trading scores, trading threes, trading floaters, layups, everything. Miami came out of a timeout at the 6:32 mark of the third quarter. They were down three, and they came out, and something that really doesn't happen very often out of timeouts, the other team getting the ball, the Heat immediately forced a 24-second shot clock violation. And that felt at the time like, man, that could be a galvanizing play for the defense, and it sure was. Before that timeout, Atlanta had an offensive rating of 141.4. That's incredible. That's, you do that over the course of a game, you're going to win most of those games. That's kind of what the Heat did tonight. Their offensive rating was right around there. But after that timeout in the middle of the third quarter, Atlanta's offensive rating dropped to 75.0. Here, and all the way down here off screen. There was that much of a drop-off. So, Miami stayed hot, and that's why they blew the game wide open. They came 1-3 short of tying the franchise record for the second time this season at 24. Instead, they made 23. But 1.5 quarters with a defensive rating of 75.0 is going to win you games. And it's something they've had trouble doing a little bit recently, is sustaining that defensive effort through entire games. And they did it through the end tonight. Here's what Eric Spoelstra had to say post-game about that timeout and the shift in the defense.
What caused it, causality, I don't know. I don't. I just know what our path to success is. It felt like we were just, trading baskets, in the first half. It was great offensive basketball. It was a lot of fun, for the fans and the players on both sides. But we weren't really making a stand. and then after that timeout, I think that sparked us. And then, when we shifted and we were able to move into a little bit more of a full court press that kind of, inspired the group, and we made some plays out of that. But it's got to be whatever it is, the scheme or whatever. It's that commitment. No matter what we do, it's always going to be tough. This league requires you to make ridiculously tough efforts over and over and over if you want to make an impact defensively.
Now, speaking about the zone, the Heat, as usual, have played the most zone in the league. That should not surprise you if you've been following the Heat for a few years. Since 2018, 2019, the Heat have used more zone than any team in the league almost every single year. They're either number one or number two. They use it a ton. But here's the thing. Before the trade deadline, they use zone, let's say, around 11.5, 12 times a game, right? That's a ton. That's about a little bit more than 10% of your defensive possessions. Leads the league by over 100, right? Blowing everybody else out of the water. Since the deadline, since their first game with the new additions with Davion Mitchell, Andrew Wiggins, and Kyle Anderson, they hadn't used zone a single time. Not once, according to our second spectrum tracking data. Not a single possession of zone since the new guys came on board. Well, tonight against Atlanta, they used zone 25 times, and the Atlanta Hawks scored just 0.6 points per possession against the zone. That is elite stuff. Again, 0.6 points per possession. That's unbelievable, right? They have games like that in the past. The zone just gets teams out of rhythm. It's a curveball. It's a changeup. It's deeper into the pitch mix. Some teams don't react very well. And Spoelstra is not only has he developed a very specific zone scheme, but he's developed one that he can throw out, playing those mind games with the other team. Here's 2 possessions of it here. Wait 5 minutes. Here's 2 more. And then there's games like tonight where, hey, it works 3 times in a row. Keep going with it. That's what they did. Of course, their zone isn't just a zone. It's not just a token 2-3 that you sit back in. It's a press zone. It gives them, they push guys up, they pressure the ball. It's designed to kill the clock. It's designed to slow the game down, force some turnovers when you can. And then once the ball advances, because most NBA teams are pretty good at beating the press, over the course of a game, you drop back into that zone, 2 guys up top, the wings on the sides, those guys pushing up to pressure the wings, the side on the bottom guys. They push up as aggressively as anybody else in zone. Then you've got the big in the middle managing side to side in the paint, managing his 3 seconds in the paint. That was Bam often tonight. Khalil Ware's played a lot of zone this season. They both did well tonight doing that. The star of the zone tonight, and it's no surprise because he's so good on the ball, is Davion Mitchell, who absolutely hounded Trae Young in the last quarter and a half. Trae doesn't often have efficient nights against the Heat. The Heat have schemed him well. They've ran zone at him. They've pressured him. They haven't always had a defender like Davion Mitchell to throw at him. And, last game, Trae Young shot 4 of 14, but it was in a win because even though he wasn't shooting well, he was controlling that game well. Tonight, he shot 4 of 12, but his impact was so reduced, especially in that important stretch of the game where the Hawks needed to respond to Miami's shooting. And a lot of that was just because Mitchell was up in his face with the zone behind him, so everybody else is managing the space behind him. And Mitchell was just up in Trae's face, making Trae play off his back heels, play backwards a little bit. And that was essentially the game. The Hawks, all their offensive momentum changed because no longer were the Heat just, giving Trae wasn't getting downhill. The Heat weren't sending doubles at Trae like they did at the end of Monday's game. It was a zone. It was pressure, getting up in his face, changed the entire game. And when the Heat have needed wins, this has been the case over the last 5-6 years, they've become this 3-and-Z team. Make your threes, throw some zone at the other team. That's often been their formula for regular season success. And it gave them, again, a feel-good night tonight. Now, The rotation. Rotation's been a little bit all over the place past couple weeks since the new guys came in. Trades will often do that, especially when you bring in multiple guys who can all play in a rotation. And when you're losing, coaches are going to naturally search for answers, for solutions. Erik Spoelstra is a solution-oriented guy. If there's a problem, he's not one to dwell on frustration. He's not one to dwell on the causes of the problem. He is forward-looking for solutions, and that's why he will tinker with his rotation, because whenever something's not working, he's finding a solution. Now, both Haywood, Highsmith, and Duncan Robinson had really good games tonight. Both have had, Duncan has had his minutes reduced lately, a little inconsistent. Haywood has had his minutes eliminated almost completely recently. And they had great games tonight. Duncan was 6 of 13 from 3. Haywood was 4 of 5 from 3. Had some really important offensive boards flying in important moments to swing possessions and give Miami more chances. Duncan was a plus 27. Haywood was a team-high plus 31. That is what we call serious impact. And, both guys have been through this. Slumps, inconsistent minutes. Duncan Robinson has had his slumps. He always breaks out of them eventually. He's had slumps that lasted months before. But he's such a good shooter, he will almost eventually always get back to 40%. Somehow he will have these breakout games. You just have to trust in his talent and his work ethic. Haywood has been through this a ton. He's been a starter. He's been a regular bench guy. He's been out of the rotation. He's been everything in between over the last 2-3 seasons. And in some ways, even though Haywood would rather be playing 20, 25 minutes a night, at least it makes it easier for him because this is not his first, second, or third rodeo with the rotation. And here's what he had to say after the game.
Yeah, I was telling Anthony that earlier this morning. I'm used to this, to be honest with you. Sometimes playing, sometimes starting, sometimes playing 7 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever. So, I'm a pro. My number's called, I'll be ready. If I'm not playing, I'm going to cheer on my teammates and provide energy on the bench somehow, somewhere.
Now, of course, you credit Haywood and Duncan for staying ready, so you don't have to get ready. You've heard that a million times before, but it's always true. But it leads us to a good point about the rotation at large. Because tonight, Erik Spoelstra started, in the first quarter, second quarter, his initial bench rotation moves, Kyle Anderson, Alec Burks, some Jaime Jaquez Jr., and when that first shift didn't go as well as he liked, he pivoted, right? And before we say anything more about it, I want you to hear what Spo has to say because he was fairly candid about what rotation decisions are like in his mind. Here's what he had to say.
I mentioned it many times. Who knows what the right decisions are? With this team. That's just the reality, and I can't claim that I'm making the right decisions. But basically, everybody's had their opportunities. At some point, we are where we are. So right now, there's kind of a clear mind. In this final stretch, just give in to the team. Just pour into the team, pour into whatever we have to do to get wins. Whether you're playing or not playing, just pour into the team. Stay ready if you're not in the rotation. Your number will get called. That's happened all year long. Everybody's gotten their opportunity. But now with this stretch run, make an impact.
Now, I'll admit it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine whenever the Heat have a loss and it's the narrative is, why didn't this guy play? Why is this guy playing so much? Why did that guy sit for these important minutes of the game? There's a lot of, as Spoelstra said earlier, there's some correlation and causation with things. It's a really tough form of analysis because you never quite know what the coach is thinking, except for the fact that, they're looking for, as we said, solutions. And I personally never get too bogged down in who's playing how and when. Sometimes if things are happening over the course of time, you wonder and you ask questions in media sessions for sure. But in single games, there is almost always a very good reason why a guy plays, why a guy doesn't play, why a player needs to rest, because usually you don't want them playing 18 straight minutes in a game. But, of course, when one guy is out, then if the other team makes a run, well, of course, it's because that guy was out. And it's never really usually the case. You have to be able to trust your entire rotation throughout the course of a game. But as it relates to this team, Spoelstra has these 3 new guys who can all play. He's got young guys he's trying to develop. He's got veterans. He's got the 2 All-Stars in Hero and Bam that he's going to play minutes every night. He's got another former All-Star in Wiggins who he's, giving a bigger role in the offense, who has been given clutch touches for them, who's come through, who Wiggins has been getting to the line a lot, which is really nice, and so is Tyler Hero. And if that continues, we'll talk about that more as it relates to Hero in future videos. But, Spoelstra has so many different options. This team is new and refurbished in a lot of different ways since the trade deadline. And I think you just have to kind of come at it from the same approach he is, right? Which is you've got to find the guys that are going to give you the best chance to win each night. Hero's going to play, Bam is going to play, Wiggins is going to play. But everybody else, it's whatever it takes, right? Spoelstra's not always going to make the right decision, but he's going to make a decision, and he's not just going to go with the things that haven't been working before. That's the reality of the team right now. That is what we're trying to, they've been saying they're going to figure it out for a few weeks now. Part of figuring it out is working through the rotation, and frankly, until you have guys that have strung together multiple weeks of good play, you've just got to play the guys who are playing well on that night. That's a tough thing for a coach. Every coach would like to have 8 or 9 guys. You're going to play these guys 20 minutes a game, 25, 30, 35. Here's your breakdown. You can write it out. You can chart it out. The rotation's going to be the same every night. That's every coach's dream. That is not the luxury of this team right now as they basically rebuild the rotation on the fly as they're trying to race for a playoff seed to get out of the play-in. It's just whatever it takes to win. And Erik Spoelstra, as he said, will not always make the right decision, but he will make a decision and will keep making decisions until he falls on the thing that works because he's trying to find solutions. So that's enough for me for now. It's been great to be back and talking with you. That layoff was far too long, but now we've got March coming up, and you will be hearing from me a ton. So until then, take care. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you very soon.